This is the Ross Kaminsky Show.
You're a great American.
Now, Ross Kaminsky.
Come on, man.
On Denver's talk station, 630 KHOW.
All righty, good morning. It's Monday. We made it through that weekend. I don't know why I say that sometimes, because I feel like I make it through the week to get to the weekend. I had a fabulous weekend going down to the leadership program of the Rockies annual retreat down at there at the Broadmoor. Heard some fantastic speakers. Trey Gowdy and Tim Scott were down there. I guess, I don't guess. I know that the first episode of Trey Gowdy's new Sunday night show was on Fox last night. He had Tim Scott on there, and I was out of the room for some of it, and my wife had it on, and she said that Tim Scott mentioned being in Colorado. He didn't mention LPR, but he mentioned being in Colorado. It was pretty cool. Emily Campagno from Fox News, Howard Kurtz from Fox News was real good. Gordon Chang, I got to say that the scariest conversation that, or remarks that I heard from anybody the whole time were from Gordon Chang about China and about China's intentions related to the United States of America. And he mentioned a story that I guess has been bubbling about for a while based on comments made by a Chinese doctor at some point in the not too distant past. Gordon Chang said that the Chinese are trying to create a virus that could sicken or kill a lot of people, also to create a vaccine, and only to vaccinate their own people, and then to at least be in a position to release that virus out into the wild and leave themselves as sort of the one remaining uninjured superpower or something close to a superpower. I don't know if that story is true, but Gordon Chang doesn't tend to just throw around random stuff. And there was a lot more very scary stuff from Gordon like that, and we're going to get him on the show. One of the things that I've been thinking for quite some time, and that was more cemented in my brain, such as it is, over the course of this leadership program in the Rockies retreat, and I'm going to be talking about this more for months and months and months, is the importance of education in the sense of it being, I think, the most important political issue facing the country right now. More than anything else I can think of, and I can think of a whole bunch of other very important issues. But I think there's nothing as important as education, and I'm going to make this a big thing for months and months, at least through all of this year, because here in Colorado, we have school board elections in November of this year. And I'm going to do everything I can, and at some point, I have a project idea in mind that I'm going to want to enlist your help with. Just help doing a little research. I don't need you to, go out and do stuff, but I will need a little help from you. We'll talk about that in a month or two or three. But the progressive left has made the takeover of education their goal. They've succeeded at it. And it's come and continues to come at a tremendous, tremendous cost to our country. And as the parent of two teenagers, I worry about this every day, and I know that so many of you do too. And there are two main aspects that we're going to be focusing on in the months to come. One is the actual educational side. What and how are kids being taught? Are they being taught fundamental principles of the American founding? Are they being taught about the Constitution? You know the answers. They're not. In most schools, they're not. They're not taught anything about basic economics. Instead, mostly, they're taught to become little snowflake worrywarts who think that the earth is going to dissolve under their little feet because of climate change, and they're taught to be little racists. In this case, they're taught to be little anti-white racists, but still little racists. And most importantly, not that those two things aren't already incredibly important, they are. But I think most importantly, they're not taught nearly enough the skills that they need to survive in a difficult world. And when you end up with the takeover of education by folks who are teaching our kids about anything other than freedom, the dignity of work, again, basic economics and what happens when you have a job and make money versus becoming a ward of the state. When you have people who teach all that wrong, you end up with people like AOC who are aggressively ignorant and simultaneously wildly egotistical, either not understanding how ignorant they are or proud of it. And you end up with people who put AOC in office. You end up with the Bernie bros. You end up with 20-somethings and 30-somethings who, if the educational system were doing a half-decent job, those would be some of the people most opposed to Bernie Sanders. To say, what do you mean I can't make a living myself? What do you mean I didn't build this, or I'm not building this, or if I go on and do something, I don't deserve credit for it, or I should have their awards taken from me? What are you talking about? The only people who should, and I use the word should very loosely here, the only people who, let me put it this way, who should be excused for liking Bernie Sanders are people who are not old enough to vote and who have either never had a job or maybe never made enough money to pay taxes under our current system, which is a whole other problem. Anyway, that's the educational side. And on the political side, we know that in K through 12, education has been completely taken over by teachers' unions. And teachers' unions are a blight on this country. And not just because of Tay Anderson. Tay Anderson is a blight as well, but for different reasons beyond the usual ones. In fact, I think most teachers' unions would rather not be as famous as Tay Anderson. They would rather sit there and do their dastardly deeds, handing control of our children's futures to people who don't care about our children's futures. They'd rather do that in silence, in quiet. And they know that what they're doing is wrong. I'm not talking about teachers here. I'm talking about teachers' unions. Most teachers forced to be members of unions if they want to have the job that they love. Teachers' unions only care about protecting their own income so that they can use that income to buy elections for Democrats. And they don't care what it does to our kids. And they're a truly evil and destructive force in this country. And it is past time for all of us, and I mean all, regardless of race or religion or even political viewpoint. It's time for all of us to start pushing back on the destruction that has been happening for a long time, but now many more people are awake to it. Talk about being woke. I'm woke now. I am woke as to the incredible harm being done to our children, in part by teachers teaching leftist stuff, and in large part by teachers' unions. It's a whole new kind of woke, isn't it? All right, let me switch gears. I'm going to come back to education again, not just today, but for months to come, and I'm going to work with you to make it our project together to try to elect better school board members wherever we can, and to try to trounce the teachers' unions wherever we can. It's going to be an ongoing project for all of us, I promise. Now, we've talked in a somewhat different context a couple times recently about the burden of proof. I've given you the example of when Bill Cosby was first accused of the stuff he was accused of. I was probably the first radio host I knew of who was on the air saying that he was guilty and he's a rapist. With Tay Anderson recently, I'm still saying I don't know. The allegations aren't yet as credible as they were against Bill Cosby. Don't know yet if he's a serial sexual predator. Might be, might not be. Don't know. In either case, people ask me, Ross, what about innocent until proven guilty? To which I always say, I'm not a court of law. Innocent until proven guilty applies in a court of law, but it doesn't apply if you have a brain. And I mean, just to make your own decision about what's the most likely thing. And so I wanted to share with you this piece by Andy McCarthy from National Review from Saturday. And it's entitled, The Lab Leak Theory, Evidence Beyond a Reasonable Doubt. Of course, there's a quote within his article now. Of course, it's only circumstantial evidence. We may never know the truth. End quote. If I've heard this once over the decades, over more decades than I care to admit, I've heard it 1,000 times. It is the rote dismissal of circumstantially based cases, and it is almost always wrong. We can no longer afford to be wrong when it comes to the origin, the generation, by regime-controlled Chinese scientists, almost certainly by accident, of a pandemic that has caused nearly 4 million deaths globally, now closing in on 600,000 in the U.S., in addition to geometrically more instances of serious illness, trillions of dollars worth of economic destruction, and incalculable setbacks in the educational and social development of tens of millions of children. I was a prosecutor for a long time, and prosecutors are in the business of proving stuff, says Andy. Every good one will tell you that the best case is a strong circumstantial case. It's the most airtight and least problematic kind of proof. Circumstantial cases are a tapestry of objectively provable facts. No one of those facts by itself establishes the ultimate conclusion for which all the interconnected facts collectively stand. Instead, each single fact supports a subordinate proposition that must be true in order for the ultimate conclusion to be valid. Stitch together enough of these subordinate propositions, and the ultimate conclusion is inexorable. We have a natural human reluctance to trust circumstantial evidence. In our own lives, we know what we know, or at least what we think we know, because we've lived it. We don't need to run down a plethora of clues to grasp our own experiences. We can describe them firsthand. If we worked in a lab that came under scrutiny, we could tell everyone how an accident there happened or assure them that it didn't happen. Ergo, we reason what we really need is direct evidence, someone like ourselves who can narrate the goings on. Only then we tell ourselves, can we really know? Even when all the disparate circumstantial trails lead to the same answer, we instinctively ask how we can trust that answer unless and until it's been confirmed by someone who was there. But that is not how it works in the real world. Once you get beyond the narrow limits of your own experience, everything else is about what you can trust. And you quickly realize you can trust a constellation of objective facts that fit together, in other words, circumstantial evidence, more reliably than the subjective account of a witness, direct evidence, whose entanglement in a controversy may erode his credibility. The murderer is apt to tell you he didn't do it, and even if the murderer tells you he did do it, he's apt to be lying about something significant. Maybe he's currying favor with the prosecutor who has demanded testimony against an accomplice in exchange for a reduced sentence. Maybe he's settling a score with the accomplice. Maybe he has mistakenly assumed that the accomplice was complicit because of what some intermediary told him. When we are trying to judge a scenario we didn't personally witness, we always want a firsthand witness to look us in the eye and say, here is what happened. But even as we listen to such testimony, we realize that we are still in a realm of epistemic uncertainty. For now, we need to consider the witness's motives, biases, intelligence, scrupulousness, and capacity under the circumstances to have perceived what happened, recall it accurately, for memory plays tricks on us all, and relate it clearly. What's the upshot of all that? Well, it means we're necessarily right back to circumstantial evidence. When it comes to something of consequence, we don't take the direct witness's word for it. We demand corroboration. And how do we corroborate a witness's testimony? The same way we prove a circumstantial case, by establishing that the subordinate facts line up with the testimonial version of events. That, for example, the records show the alarm triggered just when the witness says the break-in happened. That a nearby surveillance camera captured a streaking vehicle matching the getaway car's description only 20 seconds later. That the next morning, a series of suspicious cash deposits started to be made at banks just a few blocks apart from each other, and so on. Apodictic knowledge eludes us. That's the human condition. Whether we are in the position of relying on circumstantial evidence, direct evidence, or some combination, we're forever at a deficit. Our knowledge is imperfect, and our premises may be flawed, and constantly reminding oneself of that is what separates good intelligence analysts from bad ones. Notice that in the criminal justice system, where we apply the most exacting evidentiary standards, the requirement is proof beyond a reasonable doubt, not proof beyond all possible doubt. There is no proof beyond all possible doubt. What National Review's Jim Garrity has chronicled for months is proof beyond a reasonable doubt that the coronavirus pandemic was generated by an accident, a lab leak, not uncommon mishap in medical research conducted by fallible human beings at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Ditto the important work of Nicholas Wade, Vanity Fair's Catherine Eban, our own Michael Brendan Doherty, and a few intrepid others. Lab accidents are common and have been known to spawn infectious diseases, including the escape of SARS-1 from the Chinese National Virology Institute in Beijing no less than 4 times, according to Wade. Wuhan scientists were conducting gain-of-function research on bat-based coronaviruses, in particular their capacity to infect humans. The bats in which are found closely related but not identical viruses do not inhabit the vicinity of Wuhan. They are nearly 1,000 miles away from that densely populated city and have limited flight range. The likelihood of naturally occurring interspecies transmission outside a lab setting is infinitesimal. The lab conditions in Wuhan were insufficiently safe, grossly so it appears. Several of the lab's researchers fell ill, at least 3 severely enough to be hospitalized right at the critical time in the autumn of 2019.
This is Denver's talk station with Ross Kaminsky now. Tom
I'll tell you what,
10,
I'm going to take a little pause here, and I'm going to come back and continue
Denver.
this.
Now, Impact Traffic